Right, now I'm just going to talk very briefly now about a type of pelargonium that is very easy to grow. If you want some basic sort of type single flowering pelargoniums days, and that's what's known as the unique type of pelargoniums. Not unique for any specific reason. I think they're more unique in that the name was given to them because they're sort of they cover a sort of multitude of sins, really. They're relatively unique in that they're not the zonal, they're not the sort of regal, although regals have been used in the crossing of them over the years. And they're very simple and very easy to grow, the uniques. You can't really go wrong with them. They don't mind prolonged periods of drought. The original uniques came with this relatively sort of smaller flowers. This one's called Crimson Unique. You can see the lovely sort of deep red colours, very deep crimson sort of blotch on the upper petals. Fairly standard single blooming varieties. Now you do get a multitude of the different types of leaves. Now this one is Violet Unique, and you can see how deeply cut they are. Most of the uniques do have a slight bit of a relatively pungent scent. It's not particularly one way or another, but some are a bit more milder than others. But this one is very, very deeply cut. But over the centuries and decades, there was a bit of crossbreeding with some of the early regals to produce larger blooming types, and this one is Salmon Unique. I mean, there's lots of question marks probably over the the naming of some of them, but they do grow very strongly. If you want some strong growing pelargoniums, then unique types are the ones to go for. Okay, if we just come over here then, this is Key's Unique. This was bred by Hazel Key of Fibrex Nursery fame. And she was very much into uniques, according to Ursula, her daughter. And yeah, she did a lot of breeding of the uniques and produced another one called Hazel's Finale, which is another variety of hers. But I particularly like this one. Very vibrant blooms, very much on the sort of red to crimson spectrum. And it's quite a sort of dense grower, this one. It's got a bit more of a denser growth. Clearly a bit of influence of regal going on in there, I think. But I quite like that one. And there are a wide variety of ranges, as I say, covering a good spectrum of colour, mostly on the sort of red and violet, and the pale. There's some whitish ones as well. But they do produce very good plants. Right, questions. I asked everybody if you've got any questions, put them on the bottom of the video. And one of the key ones I had this week was about feeding. It's obviously we're in the midsummer now, so feeding is very important. And feeding cannot be emphasised enough, really, with pelargoniums. They are always very, very hungry. And certainly as an exhibition grower, I feed my plants once they're established. Now, once I've potted up a plant, much like I've done earlier, I will water that with just water for a month because there's enough fertiliser in the compost that I've used to feed it for a month. And then I will begin my feeding regime. As an exhibitor, I feed about 2/3 strength of a balanced feed at every watering all year long. Even in the winter. In the winter they're not getting it very often, but at this time of year they're being watered probably at least twice a week, occasionally 3 times a week. But they will be fed at 2/3 strength at every watering, and that is key. Where most relatively novice exhibitors go wrong is that they simply don't feed enough. You've got to feed pelargoniums very, very strongly, and they will reward you with that. So it's very important to get the feeding right, a good balanced feed. Something like the Chempac type feeds are very good ones. At this time of year you can use a tomato type fertiliser, as I've explained before, just to keep them flowering. And they usually contain little elements of nitrogen, just to keep the leaves relatively green as well. But feeding is very important, and a balanced feed is the one that most exhibitors use to keep their plants growing strong in all the 3 key elements of the leaves, the stems, and the roots. They're the three key areas of growth that we're looking to get. Obviously in the spring and in the early summertime we're looking at the bloom, where we may go over to a higher potash feed to get that boost of bloom. Now you'll probably find that most exhibitors do usually water from the bottom in the saucer. So when you're feeding, that's how you're going to administer it. They're going to be watered in that water that's going in the saucer. And that's how you'll find that most exhibitors usually water. They water from the bottom. Don't water from the top. Certainly in the winter you would never even think about watering the top, because you want all the top part of that compost and to be completely dry, because you don't want any moisture around those stems to potentially bring on things like botrytis. You certainly don't want to go anywhere near that. But you'll find that most exhibitors water from the bottom in a saucer. And the key thing is just, don't do it too much. They don't need a lot. Just if they're dry, have a look underneath. If you get a plant, have a look underneath. If it's dryish underneath, then give it some water. That one is very light. I can tell it needs a drink. So I will just stick some water in there. But not a lot. I mean, particularly now when it's very warm, I'm only going to give as much as it takes up in about half an hour. And then I'll just tip out the rest outside in the garden on the grass. Well, now something that I have been asked to do, if you get seed head forming on your plants and you want to harvest them, I've had somebody asking about how do you harvest the little beaks, as they are known in the geranium world, the Geraniaceae world, I should say, which encompasses all of the groups that have the same seeding habit. How do you harvest the seed? Well, it's a relatively straightforward process. You usually need a good nail. That's really what you want. I've got a plant here which has got a lot of beaks on. Now this is on Shrivenham Star. Now I would never generally harvest seed from plants that haven't got good characteristics or what I'm wishing to grow. So Shrivenham Star, because it's a relatively tight double, it doesn't produce a lot of seed, but this year this one's had a few on and I've just saved them to mature, if you like. And so these are just about ready to start forming their little feathered tail, which in the real world would just distribute them out in the wild. But I want to get them really just before that process starts. So I'll show you what I do, and you can have a go at harvesting themselves. They're all cross-pollinated, of course. You're not going to be able to get the same as what the plant you're taking it from, because they're all cultivars. So you could generally end up with you will end up with a mixture of genes. So you could end up with generally anything, but in general terms, you will get something relatively similar to what you're taking it from. And in this case, I'm harvesting a plant from one of my doors, Shrivenham Star. So it usually will, enhance, carry forward a number of the characteristics from that plant, which is what we're looking for. Right, so I'm just going to break one of these off that I know is just beginning to show signs of splitting. Okay, I'm going to home in on this a bit. Now, the first thing to do is just strip back the sort of debris from the bloom, and that's sort of what you're left with, really. You're basically left with the pods where the seeds are held. In this case, you'll never get more than 5 in a Pelargonium. Now, I think the majority of these have actually taken in this case. Sometimes you may just get 1, other times you may get 2, you get 3, any number up to 5. I think I've got at least 3 on this one, and you can begin to see the feather stalk just beginning to brown up. And that's when I know I can sort of harvest these. Probably, I mean, you can often wait until they split and naturally begin to sort of feather off. But you do have the chance of losing them in this case. So you do have to be a little bit careful. I'm just going to break off the base, sort of the beak stalk, and that's what Geraniaceae is all about. They've all got this little distribution beak. What you basically got to do here is split these away, and these are relatively immature now. You could wait. It's probably best to wait, but I'm going to just show you what I do. I'm just going to break one off. Okay, I've just got my thumb down there in between the 5 little lumps, which are the seeds, and then I'm just going to take one off. So there's the actual feather. That will begin to flow. Another couple of days and that will split away. All I'm going to do here, if I can sort of show you, is just get my nail and just peel back the husk. The little husk, this sort of feathered part here, and the husk house the seed. And in the wild, that would just feather up and fly away. Basically, that will curl up when it's fully ripe. And that'll curl up and just flow off. And in the wild, that would drop down and sow itself. But we want to remove the little husk. When they're this mature, if you pull them away from the base, the seed will reveal itself in the middle. I'm just going to peel back the husk. We've got a little sharp nail there. And that's going to reveal the seed. And there it is. It just easily sort of comes out. And there's the seed. Sorry, couldn't see. But there's the seed. Revealed on the end of my finger. Not quite ripe, not quite brown, but that's fine. The growing of it is done. And there are many sort of hybridizers that would sow it in that state with an attempt to actually grow it on very sort of straight away, because the shell is relatively soft of that seed. It probably would grow, germinate very quickly once sown. All 5 have been cross-pollinated. Here we are, 5 seeds. And that's harvesting seed. I mean, as I say, you can let them ripen fully, but you do, if they break, they can ping off and you'll get them all over your greenhouse. And I like to harvest them at this point. So if you're taking seed from a cultivar, you'll get something relatively similar to the cultivar you're taking it from. And hopefully, you may have a good variation on it, a different colour, whatever, that sort of thing. And that's really what you're sort of potentially looking for. But in my case, I only take them off plants where I know they've got very good characteristics. So they're the only ones that I take seed from. Okay, so sowing seed. I actually don't sow my zonal seed, anything zonal. I don't sow that until the late winter or early spring, because then you can sow them around about late February, early March, and you'll have them in flower in about June. And I've had a couple that I've done that with this year. But regals I do like to sow more or less straight away. If I just show you a seed tray. This is a sort of, I've got a segmented seed tray here, but you can use any type of seed tray. Simple compost, my 50-50 mix of perlite and a sort of a peat-based type compost, anything like that. And you can plant the seed just literally just under, a couple of mil under the surface, and just nick a little hole, press them down in, press the seed in, and just cover it over. And that's a tray of regals that I relatively recently sowed, because I like to overwinter regals. They like a little bit more time to mature a bit, to get to see what you're going to get. But zonals will actually sow much later. I overwinter seed in little pots and in little sealed pots in my kitchen, and I sow them in the spring, in the early spring, and then you'll get flowers off them very early. Okay, so there we are. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I tried to cram lots of little different bits in this week. So don't forget, if you want to get advance warning of any of my new videos, click the subscribe button below. But in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you again, and have a very good weekend and enjoy this lovely weather that we're having in the UK at the moment. Bye for now.